Welcome everyone to our third corporate giving session for the News Philanthropy Network. We're so thrilled you can join us and hope you were here the past 2 weeks and hope they were useful. We can send around the links for that. We're really lucky to have two outstanding speakers today for our third and final session, which is focused on sharing case studies of how different types of organizations are working with corporations and businesses in their communities. We're joined today by Brian Flath, who's the Associate Director of Corporate Support at WSIU in Southern Illinois, and Libbie Sparadeo, who is the Head of Community Engagement and Partnerships for VTDigger in Vermont. And so they're gonna each jump into short presentations. We'll have plenty of time for questions in between and at the end also, but feel free to drop any questions in the chat as we go, and I will turn it over to Libbie. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Yossi. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen and just click around a little bit while I'm talking. Great. So my name is Libbie, yep, and I do community engagement and strategic partnerships at Digger. We're a statewide nonprofit. We do investigative and daily reporting, publishing 6 days a week. We launched in 2009, and underwriting has always been a part of our multiple revenue streams. But I'm excited to be talking about a special project today, our Underwriting for Racial Equity project. It's about a year old, and what it is a program where we have set aside a pool of underwriting dollars to donate to BIPOC-owned businesses in Vermont. All the participants are awarded $2,000 worth of free underwriting to advertise their businesses on the site. And we were aiming to do 12 businesses per year, so one each month. I'll share a little bit about the background of the project. It's really important to how it came into being. In 2021, we were looking to stand up a regional bureau with 3 reporters to cover northwestern Vermont. But before we did that, we wanted to do some community listening so that we could make sure that the content and the way we were structuring things was really going to meet community members' information needs. And we wanted to listen with a careful ear, especially to communities that have been traditionally marginalized and underrepresented in Vermont media. So I led the listening project, and one of the requests we heard when speaking with BIPOC community leaders was that VTDigger, what they really wanted to see from VTDigger is that was us listening, but also doing what we could to share resources and helping to raise everyone's boats. Specifically, we had a request for us to donate advertising space. And we, recognize that one of the resources that we and many other digital newsrooms have is impressions, our ad space, our audience, and our influence. And our newsroom has been engaged in improving our diversity, equity, and inclusion for some time. So we really saw this request as a way that we could give rather than extract, and to make good on, a promise to be equitable and build relationships with communities that, as a predominantly white organization in a field of predominantly white organizations, we want this would be different from the way that traditionally our organization has related to BIPOC communities. And we also knew in Vermont only 2.4% of businesses are owned by people of color, even though we make up 10% of the population. And we also knew that those businesses had been impacted pretty hard by COVID. So I brought the idea to our chief revenue officer and the business team, and we looked at each other and said, yeah, this is something we can do. We run programmatic ads on our site when we, in addition to direct sold ads. So it was a little bit of a revenue hit to give this space away as opposed to making, but it was pretty incremental revenue that we'd be making on these programmatic ads anyways. And it was definitely really worth it. So out of community listening, the underwriting project for racial equity was born. And I can share a little bit more now about how it works. This is the landing page that we direct folks to. So it has a little bit about the project, the background, because we wanted people to understand that this wasn't something that we just decided to do on a whim. Like we actually, were asked to provide this, and a little bit about how it works. We have folks apply for the program through an Airtable form, and it all drops into the Airtable spreadsheet here. And I go through the sheet and accept folks, and I've pretty much been doing it on a first come, first served basis. We've had no real, haven't had to really turn anybody down, which is great. And I'll reach out to them, tell them that they've been accepted, and then connect them with our underwriting team. And they meet with the underwriting team to talk about the goals of their campaign over the course of a month and what their goals are. And then the underwriting team helps recommend what placement strategy would be best to serve those needs. So like if it's driving your email list, newsletter growth there, or advertising an upcoming event, we have different recommendations for what would be best for that. And really importantly, we offered some time from our graphic designer to work with folks that don't have a lot of experience with online advertising, or need ad creative. And so Taylor, who's our graphic designer, has been working with folks. And I'll note that the vast majority of applicants did say in the Airtable form that they would like to take advantage of, that they needed graphic design help in order to take advantage of the program. So we offer all of our ad placements. Are available to these program participants. Like we haven't, only left the bad, the least impactful placements or anything. And then after their campaigns run, they receive a report, just like any paying client would. And I suppose I'll just, how it's going so far. We announced it on our site in a post, and we did have some talking points prepared internally in case we received pushback, which we did a little bit. Got a couple nice digrams from people who felt like we were being discriminatory by, against white businesses for offering this program. But we were pretty clear internally around our reasoning for doing this. And we, by and large, the reception was really warm. Within the first 2 weeks, we got 30 applicants, and I started a wait list. So we booked it through June, and so far we've served 6 organizations, which is a little less than what we had hoped to do. But we had some staff turnover, and I was on maternity leave, and so there was some kind of events outside of our control in that regard, but we're moving forward with it. And we've actually even had some folks that were critical of VTDigger in the past apply for the program. So that's been, it's kind of it was a meaningful action step, I think, on our part to put in some effort here. And community members have really felt that, by doing so, we were saying, we see you, we hear you, and we're listening. And I suppose the only other thing I wanted to mention is we did put some guardrails around organizations that are engaged in political activity, because we did feel that that was important to, to name for editorial integrity. And that is just my short overview. Does anybody have any questions about the project or anything else?
Amazing, Libby. Thank you so much. That was so fascinating. If anyone does have questions, please feel free to raise your hand or drop it in the chat. This to me feels so exciting in a way. We think of working with businesses and the community as really primarily a revenue opportunity, but I think it's really exciting to be able to almost extend your journalistic mission and your community engagement mission through another way of engaging with organizations through VTDigger. And I guess, was this a hard sell to make internally? Were there challenges in convincing the revenue team that this was something worth doing to sort of take away ad space or underwriting space that they would normally be able to sell? But I would imagine you could make the argument that the community relations outweigh that in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that like we've been engaged in some DEI work internally as an organization before this, and I think that was really crucial to kind of like laying the groundwork and having this be something that we've been talking about as an organization before proposing something like this. But it was not a hard sell because everybody's intentions were in the right place, sort of, or we're all aligned around like we want to do better, we want to do more. And everybody was excited that this was an actionable thing that we could it takes some capacity takes some time from our team, but the ad revenue was right, a very easy thing to let go of when you looked at the goodwill that we could be building, I think. And we also have excess impressions, something which I asked our chief revenue officer about. Is that like he said most organizations have excess impressions. Like it's rare that everybody's able to sell everything, so you probably have some. Answers that.
Yes, absolutely. We have two questions in the chat from Teresa Whipple. First is, do you already have discounts available for nonprofit organizations, or is that in terms of underwriting? I know that's not exactly your area, but in case you do know, we can also
we
probably.
Actually, yeah, we don't. Something folks have asked for before. We actually hoped that we kind of, in the language for this program, geared it towards businesses because we were a little mindful that some of the nonprofit. Okay, a couple of reasons. Some of the nonprofits do tend to engage in more advocacy work, and we wanted to be mindful about that. Like we got in hot water over some Planned Parenthood ads recently, so we wanted to focus on businesses. And the other reason I wanted to focus on businesses rather than service providers, although the work they're doing is so important, is just that as people of color, you're often called upon to do service for racial equity and racial justice work, but that's not what everybody wants to do. You maybe have a pottery business or a shoe store or something, and that's work that we should support too, and not limit it to service providers or nonprofits with the program. I know that wasn't quite the question, but
no, I think that totally answers it. And one more question, then we'll turn it over to Brian, is do you think it's possible that some of those who received the free space would convert to paid supporters, or do you think other businesses would see this even and view it as another reason why they would want to support VTDigger?
I think so. We had a couple that we've noticed that some of the organizations that have never had an online marketing strategy or presence were harder to work with. It took them longer to decide what they wanted to put in the campaigns, and they required a little bit more love from Taylor, the graphic designer. So I don't know that, I think it was great for those folks to go through the experience of putting together an online campaign with some support. I don't know if they'll do it again in the future, but there were other businesses that seemed like maybe they're a little bit more savvy to the online marketing stuff. And yeah, I think, I mean, we're hoping. But we did not come into it being like, this is a strategy to convert people. And so far we have not had people convert to paying folks out of the 6 that we've run so far.
Terrific. Thank you, Libbie. Thank you so much for sharing about the underwriting for racial equity program. I think it's fascinating, and I will turn it over to Brian now to talk about the work he's doing at WSIU, which is a bit different, but also fascinating and another way of working with businesses in their community. So Brian, take it away.
Thanks for the build-up saying the work is fascinating. Now I have to come through on the presentation. Well, thank you everybody for joining today, and thank you for inviting me to share a little bit about what I'm doing at WSIU. My primary role at the station is corporate support. So my team of 3 work with businesses and organizations to support the programming that we have on both radio and TV. Allie, if you want to pull up the presentation, I can walk through that just a little bit. So I wanted to give everybody just a little bit of a overview of our station and what we cover. I work out of our main office, which is at Southern Illinois University, which is in Carbondale. For those not familiar with Illinois, Carbondale is on the exact opposite end of the state of Chicago. We're about 5 hours south of Chicago via train. We are based at Southern Illinois University, which is our license holder. In Southern Illinois, we have 3 radio signals and we have 2 television signals that we broadcast, both full NPR and PBS programming. In late 2018, we acquired the license for the PBS station located in Springfield, Illinois, which is our capital. That also has a transmitter site in Quincy and one in Macomb. Those are the northern circles that you'll see just to the left of Illinois in the middle of the map. When you put our combined television area together, we are reaching about 67 of the 102 counties in the state of Illinois, which makes us the largest public media broadcaster in the state. There are a few other top PBS television stations in the state, and there are several other NPR stations. And so that gives us an incredible opportunity to broadcast our programming over a majority of our state. And as you'll see, we also cover portions of the 6 surrounding states as well. It's sometimes surprising to people to learn that we are the primary PBS station in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and in Terre Haute, Indiana, even though in Terre Haute's example, that is a fair distance away from Carbondale, but nonetheless, that's how the market is set up. And so that is where we are. We are a relatively small staff for being a joint licensee. We currently have 28 people on our staff. So we try to help departments where we can and when it's appropriate for our skill set. I'm one of the 3 revenue raising mechanisms for our station, but I saw a need to try to help on the membership side, and most especially during our pledge drives that we hold. Pledge drives in public broadcasting have been around for decades. They've kind of been tried and true ways to raise funds. However, they have been in a bit of a decline over the past 5 to 10 years for various reasons. A lot of people have changed the way that they give. We're trying to move to more of a sustainer model of giving in public media. So as you're not giving a couple times a year, you're giving a little bit all throughout the course of the year, keeps our income a lot more stable and somewhat level over the course of the year instead of having a lot of peaks and valleys. But I've always kind of had a soft spot for our pledge drives. I didn't necessarily appreciate it as much when I was just a listener in the community, as much as when I became an employee at the station, and I kind of understood the process a little more, and I appreciated a little more what we were doing during that time. It was one of the, I guess, downfalls, if there is one, of FM Pledge, is that we do live on air asking over programming that would normally be airing. So it is taking away a bit of that programming, but we like to think for the little time that we do it, for the week that we do, that it's worth it. So about 3 years ago, I started working with our radio station manager to help work on bringing live talent into the studio when we pledge during Morning Edition and All Things Considered, which are our two flagship FM news programs as provided by NPR. We've kind of tweaked the program over the years. When I first came, we pledged a lot longer in the day, but we've kind of refined it a bit. We had a couple drives where we weren't in studio at all because of COVID, which I'm sure everybody can appreciate. But we came back, I guess three drives ago. And so the folks that we have in studio as our host, it's really a diverse group of people that we have. Some are my corporate underwriters, which you'll find out their motivation for coming in here in a minute. We will have some university officials that will come in. We've in fact had the chancellor of our university in the past be live on air with us. And then we've had just community members who, some are well known, some aren't as well known. Our airways to share why they support our station and how valuable it is to them. So you'll see here, this is a picture of a gentleman who is a regular pledger with us. He wasn't able to come in with us last week. That was last week, as was our most recent drive. But he's been in several times, and he brings a very honest and sometimes opinionated assessment as to why the listener should support the station. But of course, as a Jesuit priest, it's all from the heart. He cannot be lying, of course, as to his reasons and motivations. So he a lot of times comes in on Friday, which is really our wrap-up day for pledge. We also have community. Aside from the community members, we'll also have some of our corporate donors that will come in. And I will say that a lot of my corporate sponsors that have come in and pledged with us on air, they were doing it well before I ever approached them about our corporate match opportunity. Again, they did it because they were already doing business with us on the corporate support side. They saw the benefit of supporting the station, and they wanted to be able to use this additional opportunity to share with our listeners, but also really put some connection between their business messaging that's on the air and who they are, right? It kind of makes it now a real person who's able to talk, and not just a slight ask for support as a business owner, but a business owner asking the listeners to support a station that they utilize and that they fund themselves. There's a very symbiotic relationship in public media between the business sponsors you hear on the air and the listeners or viewers that they reach. Various studies have shown that a listener or viewer will at least attempt to do business with a station's business partner 60% more of the time than that business's competition. That's a pretty nice, competitive advantage right there. That's not the only reason people do it, obviously, but if I can put my name out there in a goodwill kind of way, which is what we feel corporate underwriting is at the station, then it's a really good win-win on both sides. So this gentleman right here, he's been a business sponsor with us for probably going on 5 years now. And he's done the corporate match program that I'll show you here in a minute now for the third time. I'm happy to say every time that he has done it, it has been met during the shift that he is in. So how's this corporate program work? I will admit this was not a new idea for me, being connected with various colleagues around the country on different platforms, but the most business-oriented one being LinkedIn. I had seen a program similar to this from a colleague down in Murray, Kentucky. They have a NPR-only station based at their university, and she had put together this matching sponsorship program. It's something that our station manager had talked with our previous executive director about a few different times, but they just never really got it off the ground. But I had a clear template here of something that I could use, and I'm all about not necessarily having to reinvent something that can just be repurposed for someone else's use. So I looked at what we could offer, and I came up with these 3 different levels of match, all of which I felt were very doable for our business clients. I have seen different versions of this from many other stations. In fact, I saw one from a station that I do some work with up north, and they have similar packages to this, but they are roughly 2 to 3 times more than what you see here. Not saying mine is too low, and I'm not saying theirs is too high. I think when it comes to doing something like this, it is all about the capacity of the market and what your clients can do. So my initiative here has been to take this to clients who I feel are most able to do it, most interested in doing it. And in many cases, it's been to clients who have also been in studio as hosts as well. It does tend to work very well when I can put a match out from the client who's on air that morning, because then not only can they talk about the virtuousness of sponsoring the station and funding the station, but they can also say, hey, for those of you who give during this next 2 hours, every dollar up to whatever their match amount is going to be matched by me. And there's a lot of gratification that goes along with that. So this last drive that we had, we ended up having 7 corporate matches. The total on the matches was $7,500. And I have to be fully transparent. One of the matches was not even secured by myself or frankly anybody else on the staff. I've had a gentleman, he's the owner of a local ad agency in Carbondale, but he's a very avid public radio supporter. He's been a listener for decades. His dad has had various jobs in his career. He was actually the university president at one point. He's been a congressman. He's a state senator. But this gentleman is very, very connected in the market, and he does some work with a local union in Southern Illinois. And he got talking about this opportunity with the head of the union, and the union made a match of $5,000 with us. And when he first did this last spring, I thought, oh my gosh, $5,000, how are we gonna do that in a basically 2-hour segment, because our pledge segments now are 2 hours, 2 hours from 7 to 9 in the morning and 2 hours from 4 to 6 in the afternoon. But the first time that he did it last spring, we were actually still able to answer phones live in the studio. There was 2 of us in the studio next to where our hosts were on the air, and we were able to take calls into the studio. Normally, and full time now, we use a call center. But at that point, we were still able to take some calls, and he and his partner, who works at the station, he actually works in the communications department at the station, at the university, also a huge NPR fan. I mean, they just came out the gate and they are calling out their friends. They are sending texts. They had emails going out. And I mean, I can see them, working their thumbs next to me as they're talking on the air. And I mean, the money just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. And I knew that it was that personal connection and outreach that they were doing that was making a difference, because I would answer the phone and, you don't know who's calling in a situation like this. And I vividly remember I answered the phone and the person said, "Hello, can I speak to Dennis?" And I said, "Well, actually, Dennis is on the air right now next to us, but I can take your pledge if you'd like." "Okay, well, he said I needed a call during this time, so I'd like to give $100. Like, great, we'll take it, right? And that's just how it worked. And it's worked that way with all the groups, but with this particular match, it's really been amazing. So I can tell you that last week they were in Thursday afternoon, and their total for the time they were in, which included the pledge, but it met the match, was $10,900, which was just incredible for the time. Our pledge week as a whole did just over $23,000. And so they did 10 of it on the one afternoon that they were in. But all that being said, we had seven matches. The other ones were all within one of these categories here that you see, $1,000, $500, or $250, and 7 of them were met. And so when you look at the $23,000 total that we brought in, 7,500 of it wouldn't have happened without these matches being out on the table. And what I kind of wonder is, if you take that 7,500 away from the 23 of that, what's left? Would we have seen 100% of that revenue without these matches out on the table? I don't know. I don't really worry about that necessarily. But this gives a lot of extra motivation for these clients. We hit it pretty hard during social media during the drive. So we come in and we take pictures of all the hosts behind the mic. We gather a quote from them ahead of time, asking them why they feel it's important to support WSIU. We will post that during their time on the air. And usually our radio page for Facebook is reserved for pushing out our content, links to the stories. We do radio features. But I would say throughout the whole course of the year, the posts we get the most engagement with are when we are featuring our talent and we're talking about pledge. And it's interesting to me because these people are talking about financially supporting and giving us money, but yet they are out there also engaging with the community and giving their perspective on why it's important to give. Now, I typically will do a shift if necessary. I don't really prefer to do it anymore because I'm out with my hand out every day asking for money. I don't know that I need to do it for another 2 hours on the radio. It's entertaining, enjoyable. When I did it last week, I had a client in who was doing a match with us for the first time. Actually, it's the first time he had ever been on the air. So I'm sure there was some comfortability, with him knowing the person that was sitting next to him. But I just think it's a little more genuine when it's these people outside of our organization who are telling the listener why it's so important to support financially rather than us internally when, well, in my case, that's just what I do all day long. So that's pretty much the story of what corporate match is at WSIU.
Amazing, Brian. Thank you so much. I think that's really terrific, and really, first of all, if anyone else has any questions or comments about this or corporate support more broadly, please feel free to drop it in the chat or the Q&A or raise your hand and ask out loud. Otherwise, I'm happy to jump in with questions because I have lots of them. But I think it's really interesting, and something I would be curious to hear more about is, it sounds like typically membership in underwriting are really two different revenue streams and two different teams handling those lines of business. And so I'd be curious to hear more about what that collaboration process is like internally to connect folks and how you all work together.
Well, as far as revenue for the station, there's really three buckets that it falls in. The one bucket would be the business support that my team sells both on radio and television. Those are the announcements you hear around the programming or see around the programming. We'll also sell event sponsorships as well. We do a large family day event in the community each April. This is the 13th or 14th year we'll do it here in Southern Illinois. We're replicating that event in Springfield this year for the first time. We have roughly over $25,000 in sponsorship revenue for those two events, which I think 13,000 of it is just from the Springfield event, which is amazing for a first time event. So that's one bucket. Then membership is another bucket, and that includes individual donors, estate plans, planned giving, major donors. And we have a director of development that handles the major gift side for us. We're kind of undergoing a transition on the true membership side. We have been working with an outside organization for several years. We're looking at possibly transitioning back to that, having that done in-house. Although also we currently don't have really any true in-house membership department either. So not quite sure how that's all going to work out, but that's at a pay grade above mine. And then the third bucket that we utilize are our budgets that we get from the university, state appropriations, federal grants, things of that nature. That's always the most unstable portion of our finances because funding changes from the state, funding can change from the university. Of course, the university's budget is contingent on what they get from the state. So if the state's not giving the university as much, then we may not get as much kicked down to us. We were in a very unfortunate situation a couple of years ago when our state, due to some political crossroads in Springfield, was without a state budget for going on 2 years. And so when the university didn't get theirs, guess who else didn't get theirs? But we have to continue doing our thing. So really, we say that membership, individual membership and corporate underwriting is the most stable and controllable forms of revenue that we can raise. And kind of our pitch on the membership side to individual donors is, this is the programming that you rely on, that you don't want to see go away. We understand it's free to you, but it is certainly not free to us. And so we need your financial support to keep doing the kind of journalism that you expect from us.
Excellent. And one of the things that really, Brian, both you and Libbie, and would love to hear you both talk about this, is so much of this work is really relationship based. So no matter the size of the organization or the amount of support you're seeking, that it is so much of this is building an affinity with individuals in the community, but also sort of making the case and helping them understand the value of why independent broadcasting, independent news is so important for our communities, essentially.
Sure. I came from a nearly 18-year career in newspaper advertising sales. And so when I took this job, I really had no broadcast experience, which was okay. But the bigger challenge I had is coming from newspapers. My key copy points were 50% off, 3-day sale, and shop today only, all of which I cannot say in any kind of underwriting on air because it violates FCC regulations. So it was really trying to change the narrative of how I went out and approached the clients. Nonetheless, though, I was happy that I was able to bring some new clients on board who had been with me over at the newspaper because I had those relationships with them, right? And I was able to share with them the value of connecting their message and business to our audience. And you're exactly right. It's a very personal kind of relationship that we have. That's why really COVID was so detrimental, I think, to so many stations and organizations who relied on that personal contact, that, meeting for coffee, going to a luncheon. When all that stuff was gone, I mean, this is okay, but it does not substitute for sitting across from someone.
Yeah, I think that's all right. And I know what I heard really clearly and what I knew to be true is that in Vermont, you cannot underestimate like how tightly knit the circles are. Like everybody knows each other, and especially among like the few and rare people of color that there are in the state, like the desire to like take care of each other and look out for each other. Like we heard from folks that like, that the most commonly contacted like advocates and spokespeople around like issues of racial equity, they're all like in a group text together. They're all like talking, and you get a request from a reporter and you're like immediately texting everybody to see like, is this reporter, are they decent? Should I trust them? Are they? So we're very aware that by building relationship, doing something that was like asked of us, and investing in building relationships was going to be something that would like reverberate and be like, have a high impact because everybody would know about it. And it would be, for once, a good thing that a news organization was doing that everybody would know about. And yeah, I think like that was absolutely something we thought about.
That's so interesting. And I think, you mentioned earlier during your talk, Libbie, about how some of the people previously were critical of the organization. And so I think by showing that you're operating in good faith and listening, and it's taking almost community engagement journalistic principles and putting them in another space as well, which I think is terrific.
Yeah, and it's small, like we're not deluding ourselves and nothing like this is like some amazing gift that we're, offering here. But yes, something actionable.
Small steps as a place to start.
Yeah. And we wanted kind of some of the first things that came out of the community listening project, which we're working on taking action on a whole bunch of other recommendations, but we kind of felt like it was meaningful to do focus first on something that would be very tangible for folks.
Awesome. We have a question in the chat from Paul. And so if anyone else has questions, please feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat. But this is for Brian. What are the 3 most powerful messages you use to get business support?
Well, our tact has really been to go out and talk about how business contributions keep us sustainable in the market, how it keeps us relevant in the market. It allows us to do the kinds of journalism that we do and to provide the kind of programming that quite frankly, on both NPR and PBS, you just don't find anywhere else, even in the myriad of media out there. It's really programming that is unique in and to itself. And that doesn't mean everybody's going to like it. Everybody's going to agree with it by no means, but it is a perspective that you don't find. So there's some of that corporate responsibility that we try to talk about. Our market itself as a broadcast market, it hasn't been rated in probably going on 10 plus years now. And so really selling the ROI effect of business underwriting on our station has never really been a thing. It is a big challenge for a lot of my colleagues, though, especially those in major metro areas, those that are working with a lot of agency accounts, because that's what the agency is doing on behalf of their client. I was never a promiser of results when I sold newspapers, and I won't start being it now in public broadcasting either. But I do promise to people that they are going to connect with a very captive audience, an audience who desires to be listening to the radio content on the dial or streaming, however they get it, who desire to be watching the TV programming they are. And that's especially a point that we can make on the radio side, because our breaks in programming on radio are anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds long. Now, on a typical commercial radio station, the advertising break can be anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes long. And so what does that allow the person to do? Well, my country station's gone to commercial now. I'm going to flip over here and I'm going to listen to this for a while. And then, you don't have in your mind, oh, I'm only going to listen to this station for 1 minute and 46 seconds before I got to go back to the other station I was just at. You stay there until they go to commercial break, and then you go over to the other station. And so what are you cutting out? You're cutting out the people who are paying for you to hear their message. Well, when our breaks are so short, two things happen. Number one is we haven't broken away from the content that they wanted to tune in on because we're not away from it for very long. But number two, and most importantly, they want to stay with that content because many of them are financially supporting it for the free radio they're already getting. Now, it's a crazy concept. Like I tell people all the time, the fact that people financially support us for something they would get for free. Like, I don't send a check down to the ABC station here so they keep Dancing with the Stars on. I just hope that they're still going to have it on, right? But with us, we're able to say, hey, it costs us $22,000 a year to have fresh air on the air. And that's a pretty real number. If any of you are fresh air fans out there, that's what Terry Gross costs for the year. $22,000. That's a lot of money. So those of you who say she's your favorite show and you can't live without her, well, we need your contribution. Otherwise, you will be living without her in Southern Illinois because we can't afford to have her on the air. And these are the choices that we have to make. And, we don't do it in a threatening, really sort of way. These are just the facts of what it is. So I think it's, for me, just to answer your question succinctly, Paul, it's about business support, sustainability, and connecting the business to our audience.
Amazing. I love that, Libbie, that was your dog. And WHOY's offices are a block away from ours in Philadelphia. So if anyone wants to come see Terry Gross, you're welcome to stop by our office. Can't promise it, but
she's nothing special there to you. You see her all the time, I'm sure.
The first time I did see her at WOH's office, I was definitely starstruck. The other question I have, and Brian, you mentioned this a little bit also, was pricing and how the match levels for WSIU, it might be different than different stations, and then other stations have higher levels. And I suppose it's knowing the market and knowing what's sustainable for folks in your community. And I guess would be curious to hear more how you think about that.
Well, I kind of think about announcement time on the air, I guess the same way that hotels somewhat think about beds in their buildings. Every night that goes by that a room isn't sold, you can't get that opportunity back. So, you know, the Holiday Inn would love to get $300 for their room, but if they don't get $300, then it's whatever they could have got for it gone. I've looked at many rate structures from colleagues around the country. And again, you have to think about what your area is like. Are you a rural area like we are? Are you Chicago, New York, San Diego? What's your audience capacity? And again, I don't really accurately know what my audience capacity is. So I'm making kind of best guesses on some numbers that I have from 2012. You know, that's getting dated, severely dated by this time. But I also know that, you know, as attrition of the audience goes out, well, then hopefully new members come in. So we like to say that it's pretty steady. It's just kind of a cycle of people, right? But our rates have been, when I started in August of 15, they were roughly, I'd say 10% lower than they are now. We've had some rate increases over the years, but I also have to justify why I'm going to charge the client more for it. You know, if I'm going to pay more for this cup here, why? Is it bigger? Is it going to last longer? Is my logo going to stay on longer? Is it a better shade of candy apple green? I don't know. Like, you got to tell me why. Now, you can talk, and you know, when we had the last rate increase, you know, inflation certainly plays a role in that. Expenses can play a role in that. In our case, inventory plays a role in that. You know, Libbie mentioned the fact about not being sold out and all this. And that's true. Once you get to a point of capacity, though, you become more valuable to people. And that's generally when people will increase their rate, especially on their most desired day parts, because if you really want to be here, well, guess what? Everybody else does too. And so we're just going to charge just a little more for that. So that's kind of how I have viewed it. I would rather sell something at a fair rate than sell a lot less at a higher rate. All right. And I have this discussion with colleagues all the time out there.
Excellent. And we're just coming up to time. So if anyone has any last minute questions, feel free. But Libbie, my last question for you is, what's next in a sense? I know this is a relatively new program. The racial equity program is relatively new and still working through the number of organizations you're hoping to be able to support. But are you thinking about growing the program? What has the feedback been from people who've participated? How are you thinking about where you go from here?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we'd really like to see it, you know, hit that 12, you know, 1 per month. And I don't know, I mean, it was not a hard sell to our underwriting team. So I'm wondering if we can do more. I mean, the demand was really high. And I'd love to offer it to more people. So I think that really, I mean, I just want to see it be full and possibly grow if we can do more. I really like the idea of having corporate sponsors during membership drives. We don't do that right now. And ours are digital only. Like, we don't have any broadcast options, but could be, I don't know. Yeah, we have a lot of, I do see it intersecting with our community listening work. one of the other recommendations that we surfaced was to have community ambassadors that are kind of like helping us to surface tips and, continually build and generate relationships with underserved communities. So, whether this continues to be something that brings new people into our fold and kind of like softens the ground before we might do something like ask someone to work with us like as a community ambassador. I could see that too.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited about the potential for matches like Brian was describing for digital organizations like you guys. I think through messaging or emails or all sorts of things, there are totally ways to.
Yeah, we always do it with
that.
with large donors, but we don't really do it with corporate supporters. So it's definitely exciting to think about.
Awesome.
I think I do want to add just one thing. I didn't mention this during my talk, but I think where the evolution of this program, where I'd like to see it go, is for us to have some organizations, or they could be businesses, that are not our regular corporate underwriters already, but want to participate in something like this, because again, they don't necessarily need all the messaging on the air. They don't necessarily need a TV announcement, but they do want to financially support the station. And you doing it this way, their $2,500 donation now becomes a $5,000 donation if the listeners or viewers do their part to it. That's really what it's meant to do, is enhance the individual giving and make the individual donor feel like they're giving $2 instead of $1, right? We just really haven't quite gotten there yet because, well, we're a small team of 3 with having a primary responsibility of that on-air underwriting. I think if we had a membership department of 2 to 3 people, that this component of it could be a small portion of what that person does. But we're growing. I mean, we went from, I think the first time I did the matches, we had $500, and then we went to $6,000 because of the union grab. But now we're up at $7,500, and these are the most matches we've ever had during a pledge drive. So, I mean, I'm not going to complain about it. I just see that as the evolution of where to go.
Excellent. So we will leave it there. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Libbie. This was outstanding. I know I learned a ton. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, everyone, for joining for all 3 weeks of this program. Allie just dropped a survey in the chat. We'd love your feedback as we look to grow this program and figure out what's next for the News Philanthropy Network. We will also send it out over email along with the recording and other resources. So stay tuned for that. And we hope we will see you at other upcoming programs. And Brian, Libbie, thank you again.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care.
Have a great day.